So throughout the years of playing guitar, I've always had this weird affection to country music. Yeah? And I really can't explain it. But, me being from Austria, coming from a completely different culture, somehow I was drawn to this whole culture of Western music and cowboys and yeah, all that stuff. So there's a part of me that you don't know about. And that part is that when I was 16, I actually lived in the United States on a ranch in Nebraska. And for 8 months, I was working as a cowboy. So when that happened, of course, then I was really exposed to the cowboy lifestyle and this whole Midwestern culture. And it left a seed in me that eventually would make me want to go to Austin, Texas and pursue my music career there. I think there is a connection there. And eventually, this probably had an influence on me too, to go to Austin, Texas and pursue my music career there. So the reason that I'm sitting here today with a cowboy hat, and lots of people keep asking me about that, is not that I'm in love with Stevie Ray Vaughan or, want to play like him. It's also not that I'm a country guitarist, but it has to do with my particular life story and my stages in my life. But somehow this hat has become part of my weird identity. But I'm just wondering, does this hat make me actually play country as well? In today's episode, I'm about to find out if I'm able to play in a country style, which, I never, over all these years, I never played in a real country band. This was one thing that I never did. Of course, when you're in Texas, you end up playing some country-ish songs, of course. But I want to show you today how even as a rocker, or let's say someone that doesn't really have the knowledge of country music, you can at least fake your way through a country song and sound pretty darn good, if I might say so, even for someone that is into country music. Let me actually just plug in my guitar and let's see how much country I got. Okay, so please let me know in the comments what you think about my country playing. If I could hold my weight on a Nashville session, I'm not so sure about that, but maybe in a kind of country pop song, I could probably do the job. So let's talk about the elements that I was using here in blissful ignorance of the real country genre. I was just using some elements here that, to me, evoke a country feel. Let's talk about those really quick. So first and foremost, I think one of the things that I would associate with country music the most is playing the six. And you could hear it. I was doing this over all the changes here in this simple chord progression that pretty much just had a 1-4-5 progression. I kept doing this phrase here, right? Just a simple chromatic walk down on the six. Then if I do this here on the A, of course I can also do the other way around. So you do this, you're already in country territory, right? So this works really, really well. What else do we need to consider here? So let's consider that this track is generally in major, right? So if I play major pentatonic, that already sounds really good here in this context. Not so much the major seventh, right? Right, that sounds not so much country. Yeah? It's a little bit too classical sounding, I would say, yeah? For at least for my little Austrian ears. Yeah, so what else do we need though? Then maybe a little bit of blues, right? We need a little bit of blues in country, yeah? So we need. So we're gonna have more of that flat seven bluesy sound. Which leads me to this topic here, that if we play the sixth here, we won't play the major scale harmonization, but instead I was doing this. I was playing the flat seven here as well, which leads to a more mixolydian kind of sound, yeah? The bluesy major sound. All right, so just slipped out here by accident, but this is our next element here, which is, if you're watching my channel, you should know the answer, the Hendrix Chordal Style. We have it again here, but only in a little bit of different kind of phrasing, right? So we got these double stops here. I'm doing this with hybrid picking, and I think that really helps me to play this in a rhythmical way where I can play those notes pretty short. Right? Really helps to keep those notes short. But for those of you who have never heard about the Hendrix Chordal Style, let me just break it down for you just in one split second here. Yeah? So basically we have one basic lick, I call it the archetype lick, which in E would be going from the 12th fret, hammering on the 14th on the B string, is that sound. And then here on the G and the B string, I'm fretting on the 11th and the 12th fret on the B string, and I'm hammering on towards the 13th fret on the G string, which is the third of E major. So I have these two embellishments. Huh? I'm playing. So that's the first step. You gotta get that down. And then you can do all kinds of stuff with that, but you know, the archetype lick would be something like that, yeah? Or there's different ornamentations of it, yeah? Then you can also play, you can play it like that. There's like hundreds of variations, yeah? But you gotta get down these embellishments, these two basically, yeah? And then connect it in a lick. And the cool thing is that this is exactly the major pentatonic. We got all 5 notes of the major pentatonic, but played in a double stop way. So yeah, so you know, if we do this method here on all the 3 chords, we already have a nice country progression together here. I'm just gonna demonstrate it just by moving the shape around, and then we're gonna do it more elegantly by staying in one region. Check it out here if I play. Right? It sounds pretty cool already. We outlined the chords. Of course, we don't want to slide around the fretboard like this all the time. Yeah? Instead, what you want to do is you want to roll from one chord to the next. Let me show you what this sounds like. So if I go here. See how I'm rolling into that E major? A. Now I got the E here. So, you know, with a little bit of practice, you'll figure out that all the chords that are just like a fourth apart, like the A to the E or the B to the E, they actually right next to each other. It's really convenient. So that will be for me going from the E major to the B major. Yeah? It's really cool. Yeah? This is me going from the A major to the E major. See how that works? If you are someone who wants to play with more melodic freedom, but you've been struggling to put together all the puzzle pieces, then I've got the perfect solution for you. Introducing my melodic chordal soloing course that will break down the Hendrix Chordal Style for you as a must-know melodic device of your improvisational toolkit, including tabs, fretboard diagrams, and practice worksheets. Click on the link below, start working on it today, and by tomorrow, you're gonna hear results. I call this the Cascading chordal lick. I just made this terminology up basically, but it works really, really well. And in this country context here, you should play the notes pretty short and keep everything pretty rhythmical. And then you mix this with the sixths that I was doing earlier, and those two factors alone will already give you a real country sound. Let me play the backing track now that I'm also providing in the description at the original speed, because when I did my demonstration, I sped it actually up to 120%. Yeah? So let me do this in the original speed. It will allow us to have a little more time and listen to all the different elements that I'm using there. I might also just use some regular blues licks in between too. And so when I do these blues licks, I'm staying in E major. But you know, once in a while, I also play a regular E minor blues lick that's mainly based on my own feel and intuition. So basically, whenever I feel, well, now my line could need a little bit of extra grit, then I'm just throwing in a regular E minor blues lick. Yeah? So let's give this a try, and I'll try to document as I'm playing. Alright, so that wasn't 100% perfect, but you get the point, right? You can put these elements together and already get this pretty country-ish sound. Now, if you're a real country player and you're watching this video, please school me in the comments. Tell me what I'm missing out on. This is what happens when a rocker plays country. You know, I mean, this is the title of this YouTube episode. So I know that I don't know. But I think for anyone trying to get started, this will actually give you a great place. And before I let you go, I have to comment on one thing that I didn't address earlier, and I'm talking about double stop bend. So in my guitaristic worldview, you know, I first heard this trademark from Jimi Hendrix. That's why I call this the Hendrix cry. And it sounds something like this. But you can also do this in a countryish way, yeah? Because the Hendrix cry is also country lick. It's like, right? It's actually this. And here's the interesting thing that you might not be aware of. Hendrix actually lived in Nashville for a good 2 years. That was the time when he was the most busy in getting together his style because he played like 24/7. That was around, I would say, 1962. So do a little bit of digging and read a little bit about that. Hendrix being in Nashville with his bass player, Billy Cox. That is probably the time where Hendrix picked up some of these soulful R&B ideas that even sound a little bit countryish. Yeah? So maybe secretly, Hendrix actually was a country boy. Yeah, we will never know exactly, but this is my theory that there is this southern element in Hendrix's playing, probably coming from his time in Nashville. So let me show you now how I was using the Hendrix cry in the country context. So, of course, you can play it here in E minor. But then you can also play it in major, right? So if I play... If I also hit the high E string, I'm actually hitting a full E major triad. Yeah? I'm bending up to the third, and then I'm hitting the fifth and the root note on the high strings. Yeah? All right, it's really cool. So what happens if I do this with the chord progression on every chord? Yeah, I get a real countryish kind of vibe. Yeah, that's it. So, those bends into the third, they're super important. And they remind me a lot of slide guitar, actually, too. Yeah, if you think about it, like lap steel, pedal steel guitar. That's the vocabulary right there. I hope you enjoyed this episode and it inspired you, too, to try to play a little bit of country lead guitar. And please forgive my ignorance. I know that I'm not a country guitar player, but maybe this gave you some inspiration. And definitely, I want to turn you on to study the Hendrix Chordal Style because this method is definitely going to give you a leg up in playing melodically over chord changes. In this sense, just watch this lesson here next and keep on rocking. Talk to you soon.